Imagine this. You're standing in front of a mirror at 3:27 a.m., the kind of mirror that doesn't flatter, only reflects. Your eyes are bloodshot from too much screen time, too little sleep. Your jaw clenches involuntarily. You can't stop thinking about that thing you said earlier, the lie you told your partner, the passive-aggressive comment at work, the shameful fantasy that emerged uninvited. And in that cold, quiet moment, something flickers behind your reflection, not visually, but intuitively, like a breath just over your shoulder, a presence that's not quite you, but also unmistakably yours. You blink, your image blinks back. But what if that reflection is not just mimicking you? What if it's watching you? The darkness within, the buried impulses, the repressed rage, the lust, envy, cowardice, superiority, vengeance, all the things you pretend not to be. What if they aren't dead, but alive? What if they're not only alive, but guiding you? You get up the next day, smooth your hair, speak kindly, perform well. You act good, you act enlightened, you act in control. But underneath that mask, something moves, something ancient, something waiting. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the hidden self that contains everything you refuse to see about yourself. And here's the terrifying part. The more you deny it, the more power it gains. The more you ignore it, the more it controls you. Not in obvious ways, not through possession or madness. No, it's far more elegant than that. It leaks through your sarcasm, it fuels your superiority complex, it whispers behind your insecurities, it sabotages your relationships while convincing you that they were the problem. It pretends to be your protector while keeping you in cages of your own making. You say you want peace, but find yourself addicted to drama. You want intimacy, but flee vulnerability. You post quotes about light while secretly craving power over others. So let's ask the forbidden question. What if the person ruining your life is you? Not the you know, but the you refuse to know. And what if you could meet that version of yourself? What if instead of running from it, you looked it in the eye? Would you see a monster? Or would you see a wounded child? Would you find terror? Or would you find truth? You see, the modern world tells you to be positive, stay calm, don't be toxic. It teaches you to silence your anger, hide your jealousy, swallow your sadness. It worships light while denying the night. But you are made of both, and ignoring one only ensures that it leaks into everything. Jung warned us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let that sink in. That argument you had, that self-sabotage, that breakup, breakdown, burnout, what if those weren't accidents, but messages? What if every moment of emotional chaos was your shadow trying to speak? We live in a culture obsessed with surface-level healing, smooth skin, fixed posture, a perfect mindset, a 5-step morning routine, but none of it touches the raw, pulsating primal core within you, the part that still screams from childhood, still hungers for revenge, still dreams of domination, still aches to be loved as you are and not as you pretend to be. So here's the paradox. The part of you that you're most ashamed of may be the key to your liberation. The parts you silence may hold the voice that finally tells you who you are, and the thing you fear becoming may be the only way to become whole. But are you ready to meet that part of yourself? Are you ready to turn around, to walk deeper into the psychological cave and ask the unspoken question, what is hiding in me, and why has it been hiding so long? This is not about fixing yourself, it's about facing yourself, not self-help, self-confrontation. The path is not clean, it is not peaceful, but it is real, and realness is the first taste of true power, because the shadow isn't just where your darkness lives, it's where your strength sleeps, your honesty, your fire, your creativity, your soul. So, are you willing to go deeper? Let's descend. Let's explore where the shadow came from, how it formed and why, despite all your best efforts, it still whispers your name in the dark, because until you turn toward it, it will keep pulling your strings, and you'll keep mistaking its chaos for fate. It begins earlier than you think. Before you were old enough to question yourself, before you had the words to say, that hurt, before you even knew who you were. From your first moments of life, you were handed a silent contract, an invisible rulebook called acceptability. Be pleasant, be polite, be safe, be good. You learned that certain emotions brought affection, while others brought punishment. Joy got you attention, rage got you sent away. Tears brought some comfort, until they became too much. Then came the scolding. Don't cry like that. Big boys don't cry. Nice girls don't get angry. So you adjusted, you adapted, you split. The parts of you that were approved of, the helpful, smart, kind, quiet, talented, became your mask, your ego identity. The parts that weren't, the furious, jealous, needy, wild, terrified, were buried, locked behind psychological doors you forgot even existed. But they never died. They became your shadow. Carl Jung described the shadow not as evil, but as everything about ourselves that we have refused to admit into consciousness, not just the malicious, but the authentic, the loud, raw, embarrassing, messy humanity that had no place in your childhood survival strategy. You see, to belong is one of our deepest needs, and when faced with the choice between authenticity and attachment, too, he child will always choose attachment. That's the hidden trauma of civilization. We learn to belong by learning to betray ourselves. And this betrayal becomes so habitual, so reflexive, that by adulthood we don't even know we're doing it. We call it being nice. We call it professionalism. We call it not making a scene. But often, it's just a mask to hide the fact that we are ashamed of ourselves. Jung was not the only one to recognize this pattern. Friedrich Nietzsche saw it too. He called out the slave morality of modern man, who cloaks his resentment and cowardice in the garments of virtue. Arthur Schopenhauer described life as a battle between blind inner forces and the illusion of rational control. And Gabor Maté, drawing from decades of addiction therapy, put it plainly: trauma is not what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. Trauma fragments you, and your shadow is the bag you drag behind you, filled with all the parts you had to cut off just to survive. But here's the danger. What you deny within yourself, you begin to see everywhere else. This is the psychological mechanism called projection, and it's not just an idea, it's a force. You repress your rage, and soon the world looks full of hostile, arrogant people. You deny your sexuality, and you start condemning others for being perverse. You bury your fear, and suddenly everyone else seems weak. You mistake your unconscious for reality. You think you're seeing them clearly, but you're only seeing yourself inverted. This is how the shadow begins to run your life, not through possession, but through perception. And your ego, the part of you that wants to appear strong, correct, evolved, will do everything it can to keep the shadow in the dark. Why? Because admitting the truth would break the image. And the image is sacred in a society like ours, a society obsessed with being liked, being seen, being validated. Not a society that wants you to know yourself, only to display yourself. Look at social media. Look at therapy culture. Look at wellness influencers. We have endless tools to polish our image, but almost none to embrace our shame. Because real self-knowledge doesn't make you look good, it makes you look human. This is why Jung said that the shadow is 90% gold, not because it's always beautiful, but because it's real, and reality is the source of all power. But the shadow is terrifying for a reason. It threatens the core illusion that most of us live by, that we are in control, that we are moral, that we are conscious. In truth, most people are not fully conscious. Most people don't have thoughts. They are had by thoughts, by patterns, by traumas, by inherited beliefs that have never once been questioned. Jung understood that the journey to wholeness isn't about becoming better, it's about becoming more complete, not more pure, but more true. This means confronting everything you were told to suppress. It means facing the envy, the lust, the hunger for power. It means realizing that your greatest potential doesn't lie in being perfect. It lies in integrating the exact thing you were taught to be ashamed of. And that integration doesn't happen by talking about it abstractly. It happens by experiencing it directly, by sitting with your discomfort, by noticing your triggers without blaming others, by saying, yes, this is mine, this hatred, this jealousy, this fear, I won't run anymore. But we don't like discomfort, so we distract, we numb, we fix, we project. This is the hidden problem. Not that we have a shadow, but that we refuse to meet it. We're scared of the mirror, scared of silence, scared of solitude, because in those spaces, the mask slips, and when it does, we realize how little we know ourselves. But here's the turning point. You cannot transcend what you have not yet faced, and you cannot integrate what you refuse to name. The shadow holds your wounds, but it also holds your healing. It holds your rage, but also your courage. It holds your fear, but also your intuition. It holds your shame, but also your freedom. And the longer you leave it unconscious, the longer it dictates your destiny. Now ask yourself, what would happen if you didn't ignore the shadow? What would your relationships look like? Your purpose, your power? What would your life look like if you lived with the whole of who you are? That's what we'll uncover next. Because once you understand what the shadow truly costs you, you'll never look away again. You think you're making your own choices. You think your habits, your desires, your relationships, all of it is under your control. But what if that's the illusion? What if the very things you blame on circumstance, failed love, stalled ambition, chronic insecurity, are not accidents, but consequences? What if they're the visible scars of something deeper, something inside you that you've never dared to face? The shadow doesn't just live inside you, it leaks, it drips into every corner of your life. It speaks through your tone when you argue, it glares behind your smile, it moves your hand when you slam the door, it picks your partner, it shapes your dreams, it chooses your addictions. And the most dangerous part is this, you don't even know it's happening. Because the shadow doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't break down the door, it rearranges the furniture. It doesn't destroy your life in one dramatic act, it slowly steers it into emptiness. It sabotages you with your own hands. Consider the relationships you've run from, the ones where you claimed they were too much or I just wasn't feeling it. But what if they weren't too much? What if they touched a wound you weren't ready to feel? What if intimacy isn't something you fear because of others, but because of what it reflects back about yourself? This is the shadow's first great trick, emotional projection. The mind, unable to admit its own pain, casts it outward like a film projector. Your fear becomes their intensity, your abandonment wound becomes their neediness, your suppressed rage becomes their toxicity, and you walk away, convinced you were escaping someone harmful, but all you did was flee from your own reflection. Next comes the second trick, numbing. The more you avoid the shadow, the more it aches, and the more it aches, the more you seek relief. Not healing, relief. You scroll for hours, not because you're bored, but because you're avoiding the terror of being alone with your own thoughts. You chase highs, not because you love excitement, but because your soul has grown numb. You drink, you binge, you perform, you hustle, all in an attempt to feel something, or feel nothing at all. Gabor Maté calls this the root of addiction, not pleasure-seeking, but pain avoidance. And what is more painful than facing the reality that you don't know who you are anymore? The shadow, left unacknowledged, becomes a vacuum, and the more you fill it with fake pleasure, the more it swallows your meaning. This is how depression is born, not just from chemical imbalance, not just from trauma, but from a soul severed from itself. When you exile your darkness, you exile your aliveness too. You start saying things like, I don't know what I want anymore. I don't feel like myself. I just feel empty. But you're not empty. You're crowded, with rejected parts of yourself screaming behind the walls. And that brings us to the third consequence, identity confusion. Because when the shadow controls you from the dark, you can't tell what's really you anymore. Are you ambitious? Or are you just trying to prove your worth to a dead parent? Are you kind or just terrified of confrontation? Are you spiritual or just afraid to face your anger head-on? Without shadow work, your values become defense mechanisms in disguise. You pride yourself on self-discipline, but really, it's perfectionism rooted in shame. You boast about being unbothered, but secretly, you're numb and disassociated. You champion positivity, but inside, you're suffocating in silence. This is how the ego survives, by disguising repression as righteousness, by confusing suppression with strength, and the culture rewards you for it. Look around. We live in a world built on masks, a society that promotes false selfhood as virtue, the high-functioning professional who never breaks down in public, the influencer who smiles through every storm, the wellness guru who talks about vibrations while avoiding their childhood trauma. We've created a world where shadow suppression is not only normal, it's profitable. And so the fourth consequence arises: collective delusion. A world of disconnected people, terrified of looking in the mirror. A culture that pathologizes emotional depth, that medicalizes discomfort, that celebrates dissociation as cool or unbothered. You think the news cycle is crazy? The political chaos, the moral panic, the hatred online? Much of it is unintegrated shadow, projected en masse. Nations can repress, just like people. Groups can deny their history, just like individuals deny their trauma. And when they do, the shadow always returns, with vengeance. It returns in scapegoating, in polarization, in mass hysteria, in war. Jung saw it in Nazi Germany. He warned us that whenever people disown their inner evil, they become susceptible to outer evil wearing a righteous mask. This isn't abstract. This isn't philosophical. This is urgent. Because the longer you avoid the shadow, the or the shadow invades your life by stealth, you'll keep getting into relationships that trigger your deepest wounds. You'll keep choosing careers that drain your soul. You'll keep sabotaging yourself the moment success feels too real. You'll keep playing out the same story over and over and over, calling it just the way things are, until one day, something breaks, a breakdown, a betrayal, a panic attack in the middle of the grocery store, a grief you can't name, a hunger that no achievement satisfies. That's the shadow at full volume. That's your soul screaming to be met, not fixed, met. And here's the tragedy. It didn't have to get that far. You didn't need to lose everything. You only needed to look within when it first whispered your name. But no one told you that the shadow was a teacher, that it carries not just wounds, but wisdom, that inside your darkest traits are your truest instincts, your deepest values, your purest strength. You weren't meant to destroy the shadow. You were meant to integrate it, to welcome it back home, to make peace with the parts of yourself you thought had to die for you to be loved. Because that's the final consequence no one talks about. When you reject the shadow, you reject your wholeness. You spend your life performing a version of yourself that feels safe, but hollow. You become successful, but not fulfilled. Seen, but not known. Respected, but not free. And you wonder why everything feels just out of reach, as if something vital is always missing. It is, and it's been with you the whole time. Now the question becomes, how do you stop running? How do you turn around and face what you've always feared? How do you reclaim the parts of yourself you lost just to survive? That's where we go next. Because to rebel against the shadow is to remain enslaved by it, but to dance with it? That's where freedom begins. You were never meant to stay broken. The shadow is not your enemy, it's your exile. And rebellions are not born from comfort, but from the unbearable weight of exile. So the question becomes, how do you return to yourself without collapsing under the truth of who you've become? It begins with a revolt, not against the world, not against your parents, not against the ones who hurt you, but against the illusion you've been living. The illusion that you must be good to be worthy. The illusion that you must be light to be loved. The illusion that you must be in control to be safe. These lies are your real prison, and every jail cell has a door. The key? Awareness, followed by radical integration. But first, a warning. This rebellion is not a clean process. There is no 7-day plan, no morning routine, no app to download that will save you. This is war, a civil war of the soul. Because when you meet your shadow, it will not say, welcome. It will scream, it will seduce, it will rage against the light you bring into its cave. Because it has been betrayed, because you abandoned it for years, because it learned how to survive without you. So the first rule of this rebellion is this: approach with humility. You are not superior to your shadow. You are not above your rage, your lust, your fear, your pettiness, your cruelty. You are them, and they are you. And until you bow to that reality, nothing will change. Start small. The next time you're triggered, pause. Don't defend, don't blame, don't justify, just observe. Ask, what part of me is being touched right now? What does this emotion want me to see? What have I buried that now wants to be heard? Then listen, not intellectually, somatically. Where do you feel it? In your chest, in your gut, behind your eyes? The body speaks shadow fluently, if you're quiet enough to hear it. This is not analysis, it's encounter. You're not dissecting your shadow like a coat. Ups. You're sitting across from it like a mirror, and when you do, you'll feel its pain. Because beneath every toxic trait is an ancient wound, behind every defense is a terrified child, and every time you rejected a part of yourself, you deepened that wound. The rebellion, then, is reparenting your shadow. You were taught to be ashamed of your anger. Now you learn to ask, what injustice is this rage pointing to? You were taught to suppress your jealousy. Now you ask, what longing does this envy reveal? You were taught to silence your grief. Now you say, let it speak, let it mourn, let it move me. You become your own witness, your own validator, your own integrationist. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's the rebellion, not fantasizing about who you could be, but descending into who you already are and owning it. Here's another radical shift. Stop moralizing your darkness. The shadow is not bad, it's misunderstood. Think of your selfishness. It once protected you from giving too much and being drained. Think of your defensiveness. It once shielded you from betrayal. Think of your manipulation. It once gave you control when you felt powerless. They are not virtues, but they were strategies. Strategies built by a younger version of you, one who survived in a world that punished honesty and rewarded masks. So don't punish yourself for what you became. Honor yourself for surviving. Then, choose again, not from shame, but from sovereignty. You are no longer that scared child. You are no longer at the mercy of those old patterns. Now, you get to meet the shadow not as a victim, but as a warrior. Because integration is not compliance, it's alchemy. It's taking the heat of your rage and forging it into boundaries. It's taking the ache of your shame and weaving it into compassion. It's taking the chaos of your desire and shaping it into purpose. This is the transformation Nietzsche called for when he said, you must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star. It's not about silencing the storm, it's about learning to dance inside it. And the greatest dancers of history, the mystics, the artists, the visionaries, were all fluent in shadow. They didn't hide from it. They drank from it. Jesus in the desert, Buddha beneath the tree, Jung in his red book Madness. Each one faced their demons alone, not to destroy them, but to discover what they were guarding. Because every shadow part you've rejected holds a piece of your soul. That fire you were told was too much, that's your leadership. That longing you were told to ignore, that's your truth. That sensitivity you buried, that's your gift. The rebellion, then, is not external. It's not a fight against society or culture or your family. It's the internal uprising of authenticity over performance. And yes, the world will resist it. People who knew the mask will feel threatened by the face beneath it. They may call you selfish, they may call you arrogant, they may call you crazy, but that's only because they haven't met their own shadow yet. Let them be uncomfortable. You are not here to be understood, you are here to be whole. And as you do this work, as you reclaim every lost part, you will feel something returning. Not happiness, that's too small. Something older, something deeper. A sense of rightness, a sense of presence. A knowing, humming certainty. I am not hiding anymore. You'll begin to speak more truth. You'll walk into rooms without shrinking. You'll say no without guilt. You'll love without possession. You'll feel your body, your soul, your yes and your no like a tuning fork. That's the power of integration. You stop being a fragmented self, scrambling for control, and become a unified force, rooted in self-awareness, compassion, and truth. And the world around you, it may not change overnight, but your experience of it will, because when you no longer fear the darkness within, you no longer fear the darkness without. You become dangerous in the best way, not violent, but unshakable. So ask yourself now, what part of you have you most feared becoming, and what would happen if you finally let it speak, because the rebellion has already begun. The question is, will you finish it? There's a moment, rare, trembling, irreversible, when everything goes still. You've screamed, you've wept, you've descended into the chaos, you've faced your shadow, trembled in its presence, and returned with its name. And now, silence. Not the kind that feels like absence, the kind that feels like arrival. You sit, breath slower than it's been in years. There's no need to impress, no need to defend, no hunger for validation, no fear of being seen, because for the first time, maybe in your entire life, you are not at war with yourself. And here it is, the final realization. You were never broken, you were never wrong, you were never too much, too dark, too angry, too needy, too strange. You were just incomplete. The shadow didn't come to destroy you, it came to return you. Every judgment you held against yourself, every fear you tried to escape, every sabotage, addiction, impulse, craving, lie, it was never evidence of your failure. It was the language of your forgotten self crying out, "Come back to me." And the greatest lie ever sold was that salvation would come by cutting away the parts of you that hurt. That healing was about lightness, detachment, purity. That growth meant climbing out of the pit. But Carl Jung, sitting in his tower, scribbling in madness, knew something deeper. The gold is in the dark. The self is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. The truth, you didn't need to become someone new. You needed to remember who you were before you learned to be afraid of yourself. Look closer. That rage you buried? It's not just fire, it's conviction, it's protection. It's the part of you that says no more when the world tries to use you. That envy you hated? It's not just poison, it's clarity. It shows you where your deepest longing lives. That grief, that crushing, silent, ancient ache. It is your love. Love that never got to land. Love that never got to speak. Love that still believes healing is possible. And that's the paradox. The parts of you that scared you the most were carrying your soul the entire time. You weren't losing yourself, you were being led. Led through the labyrinth, through projection and pain, through false selves and abandoned dreams, through shame and stillness and surrender. Until you stood at the center and realized there is nothing left to fix, only more to feel. There is nothing left to chase, only more to remember. This is not enlightenment, this is not transcendence, this is homecoming. Because in the deepest cave of your shadow, beneath every scream and scar, was your innocence. The part of you that knew joy without condition, that played without shame, that wept without fear of rejection, that loved without needing to earn it. And now, you can finally hold that part, not as something weak or naive, but as your truth. The shadow journey, what Jung called individuation, doesn't end in becoming superhuman. It ends in becoming fully human, able to rage without destroying, able to grieve without collapsing, able to desire without shame, able to be alone without feeling lost, able to see others clearly, because you've finally seen yourself. This is the wholeness you were chasing through self-help books, meditations, lovers, goals, gurus, and it was here all along, waiting at the bottom of your pain. Here's the final truth. The shadow was never holding you back. Your fear of facing it was. You feared that if you opened that door, you'd fall apart. But the opposite happened. You opened it and became whole. And now, everything shifts. You no longer need to seek worth. You know it was never lost. You no longer beg the world to reflect you. You radiate your truth, quietly, steadily, relentlessly. You no longer live from reaction. You respond with power, with choice, with presence, and your relationships transform because you're not trying to find someone to complete you. You're meeting others from fullness, not from need. You're no longer scared of conflict because you know that your anger has wisdom. You're no longer scared of failure because you know that shame is just a story and stories can be rewritten. You're no longer scared of being alone because now, when the room goes quiet and the world fades away, you are with all of you, and there's nothing more holy than that. Now, your life becomes art, not perfection, but honest, messy, vibrant, soul-splattered art. You'll write things you didn't know you carried, say things you didn't know you believed, feel things you used to numb, hold space for things others run from. And they'll ask, how are you so grounded, so alive, so clear? And you'll smile, Not because you have it all figured out, but because you're no longer afraid of not knowing, because you know who you are now, not the image, the essence, the full, contradictory, complex, beautiful truth. So the final question is not, how do I fix myself? It's, how do I honor the whole of who I am every single day? There is no finish line. There is only practice. There is only presence. There is only you, finally returned, no longer divided against yourself. This is the great secret. This is what Carl Jung saw. Not a path to perfection, but a return to wholeness. And the shadow? It's still with you. It always will be. But now, it walks beside you, not behind, not below, but as a partner, as a guide, as a guardian of the parts no one else dared to love. And in that companionship, you become unbreakable. Not flawless, not fearless, but fully, deeply, irrevocably, you.